everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Quack Podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Quack.
And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem. While this is an odd show for WCW, it's not a horrible show. There is a lot of other things going on behind the scenes in this one that make this one pretty historically significant.
Yes, we're going to start on our Slamboree series here, and our first one here, Slamboree 93.
All right, so a really quick, condensed, small version of the history here. In 1992, a guy named Cowboy Bill Watts took over for the Pizza Man to run WCW. He ran Mid-South Wrestling, and he's kind of a taskmaster. He's kind of an ass. He's one of those people that either you love him or you hate him, and most people hate him.
Yes, he was one of the worst ever to really do any kind of booking, any kind of show.
No, he had a good idea. Like, he instituted a lot of the rules, like no over-the-top rope. The old 70s rule, if you get thrown over the top rope.
He came up with the hunchbacks.
No, that was the Pizza Man. I'm talking about Bill Watts.
Oh, okay, Bill Watts. Yeah, Bill Watts was good.
Yeah, Bill Watts instituted the rules like no throwing somebody over the top rope or was a disqualification. He brought that back from the 70s.
Yeah.
He brought out that no mats around the ring because it took away the appearance, it took away the toughness. So some of those things were okay, but he had a penchant to go backwards instead of move forwards. And right now at this time, Bill Watts is technically still with WCW. He put this show together, but he was no longer in charge.
Yeah, basically. So get ready for some fun stuff here because World Championship Wrestling presents Slamboree 93, May 23rd, 1993 at the Omni in Atlanta, Georgia.
Yeah, they specifically chose this to be in the Omni because it was the home of Georgia Championship Wrestling, which became World Championship Wrestling, where they are now. There's a lot of great history in Atlanta for wrestling, so that one made a lot of sense, and especially with what they did with this show.
You had a big tagline, one moment, one ring, one mega event, one pile of shit, in my opinion.
I didn't hate it. There were things about it that I definitely wish I could never ever see again because I don't want to bleach my eyes by watching it again. I didn't hate it. I enjoyed watching it. But unless you're a super purist, you're not going to like this show.
Yeah, this is true. Because on commentary, we had Tony Schiavone and Larry Zbyszko and one match with Johnny Valentine.
Yeah, it was supposed to be Tony Schiavone and Jesse Ventura. At this time, Jesse Ventura was having a lot of problems with blood clots in his legs.
Yeah.
So he was spent most of a year and a half, 92, 93, and into 94, in and out of the hospital because of blood clots. That's why Larry Zbyszko stepped in. And Larry Zbyszko's not great by any stretch of the imagination, but there are worse.
Yeah, he's knowledgeable, but he can put you to sleep at the same time. It's just, depends on what you're liking. But on interviews, you had Missy Hyatt and Eric Bischoff.
Yeah, Eric Bischoff, this is another where we're going into the history. Eric Bischoff is not yet running WCW as the executive producer. Right now, Ole Anderson, or Alan Roganowski, is the interim because they're trying to figure out where they're going to go next. Jim Ross, everybody thought Jim Ross was going to get it. Jim Ross didn't get it, and that's why he left and was on WrestleMania 9 because he was mad he didn't get the position. So then everybody thought Tony Schiavone was going to get the position. Tony Schiavone never once applied, and we get Eric Bischoff some 5 months later.
Yeah, and on the ring announcer, we had Gary Michael Capetta.
He's really good. He's not as good as the Fink, but he has more energy, and if he would have had a better microphone and a better understanding of production value, he could have been one of the tops.
Yeah, I still consider him one of the tops. I think he was the best that WCW had.
Oh, by far.
Yeah,
by far. He was better than Buffer.
And referees, we had Randy Anderson, Nick Patrick, and Mike Atkins.
They're all decent. Nick Patrick is the one that everybody knows. Mike Atkins didn't do a whole lot. Randy Anderson was always known as Pee-wee. He was a decent referee. He had a lot of health problems, so he never transferred over into the WWF, but they were all decent.
They were. And our Hall of Fame host, the legendary Gordon Solie.
Gordon Soley was awesome. Now, that's how they started out the show. They had the legends in the ring. They had already started announcing them.
Yes, because that is my quack attack! And I'm going to let you continue.
All right, but they didn't. The only thing is that annoyed me is we didn't hear Gordon Soley actually announce all their names. When it came on, they were already in the ring.
It was beautiful.
But it was beautiful. So they had 4 of them who were inducted into the WCW Inaugural Hall of Fame class. That was Lou Thez, Mr. Wrestling number 2, also known as Johnny Walker, Vern Gagne, and Eddie Graham. Now, the other legends who were in there, Ole Anderson, the Assassin Jody Hamilton, Ox Baker, Red Bastien, Lord James Blears, the Crusher, the Fabulous Moolah, who had a big sedan of 12 wrestlers who carried her down to the ring, Greg Gagne, Bob Geigel, Stu Hart, Magnum TA, Bugsy McGraw, Don Owens, Dusty Rhodes, Grizzly Smith, John Talos, Mad Dog Vachon, and Johnny Valentine, who had to sit outside because he's in a wheelchair. He's no longer able to enter the ring at this time.
Yes, I mean, it was a great thing to see these legends. This was very important to WCW with the enriched heritage that they had from the NWA. It was a big thing.
Yeah, and NWA and AWA, as we reviewed in our first Super Clash, did try to work together. That's part of why they brought in Vern Gagne, who never wrestled for NWA proper, the WCW. He was part of the old NWA faction. That's why he was brought in. And of all those legends, only 4 of them are still alive today. The last one who just passed away recently was the Assassin Jody Hamilton, who is the father of Nick Patrick.
But don't forget, during this whole segment, we had our buddy, Max Payne.
Yes, Max Payne, who always does our Reasons, is a really, really good guitar player. And he played the music for the Legend show to kind of bridge the old and new style. And I enjoyed it. I think it was a really good segment. It really capped off what this show was supposed to be about.
Definitely. But let's move on here to the first match. We had Too Cold Scorpio and Marcus Bagwell taking on Bobby Eaton and Chris Benoit. Very young Chris Benoit, very young Marcus Buff Bagwell there. No buff in this one.
Yeah, he was still Marcus Alexander Bagwell. He hadn't even joined the WCW Special Forces.
He wasn't even an American male yet.
All the same thing. I will point out before we go into this decent match that the fans here were not very smart, because one fan held up a sign that said M-A-R-U-S. Instead of Marcus, it said Morris is great.
It does happen.
But this match was really good. He was wearing, Benoit wore his Wild Pegasus, the black and white striped tights. Bobby Eaton came out looking good. Scorpio and Bagwell had matching tights. This was a really good match. Very standard tag team style opening match. But it was really, really solid. I enjoyed it. The finish was a little bit odd.
I did not, this was the problem with this match. Watching Too Cold go with his leg drop, his flipping leg drop, and landing on Benoit's head. Yeah. I'm like, come on, you got to perfect that a little better. Yeah. And he did throughout their matches. If you ever watched Scorpio and Benoit, he did.
Yeah, and they pointed out that just a few months before this, they had their first match in WCW, which we have reviewed, that went 9 minutes and 59 seconds, and it was a great match. This one I went 2.5 stars. It was good. The ending was a little odd, but it was a really good match, and the crowd liked it.
Yeah, it was a good setting of the table, definitely. I'll go 2.5 with you on that. I'll bump it up. I was going to go 2.25, but yeah, it's a solid opener, and that's what you need in these kind of shows, something to get the fans excited.
Yep, and coming up next, we had Colonel Robert Parker come out, or Robert Fuller, for those of you who watched him in Continental. Or
most underrated manager.
Yeah. He's been a few other names, but he came out.
Tennessee Lee.
Yeah, Tennessee Lee. He came out because Van Hammer had rebuffed joining Colonel Robert Parker's stud stable, and so Colonel Robert Parker said he found someone better, and we get this match, which I wish we wouldn't have, but at least it served a purpose.
Yeah, Sid Vicious taking on Van Hammer. Yes, there was that running joke I always remember. You can't win a match if your finishing move is a tap out or your name is Van Hammer.
Yep, and they still called him Rock and Roll Van Hammer. At least at this point, he realized carrying a guitar that he couldn't play was stupid. So now he just bobbed his head. Yippee! He's a bobblehead doll. But Yeah, at this point, this is when Sid used to carry down the ring the stretcher. Another short-lived thing, but I want to get into a couple other things that are more important than this match. This, again, he said, took place in May of 1993.
Yeah, this was a 35-second match for anybody that did not know. Yes. I gave this 2 stars just because it was quick, and I'm thanking God for that.
I went 1.5. I care more about in 5 months from now, October of 1993, Arn Anderson and Sid Vicious in England get into a stabbing match with scissors. That is still 5 months away.
Yep.
And we are a year and a half away removed because it took place in October of 1991. Brian Pillman whooped Sid Vicious's ass and he came back with a squeegee. Sid did not have a great early 90s, folks.
Well, he did technically. I mean, in the F, he actually did good before he came back over.
Well, okay, fair.
But he got the main event of WrestleMania.
Yeah, fair, but we already talked about that, and it was awful.
It was.
But yeah, Van Hammer took a power bomb, laid there like a slug for a 1.5 star. You gave it 2. I think we've talked about it enough.
Yes. Next match up here, 6-man tag, Dick Murdoch, Don Morocco, and Jimmy Superfly Snuka taking on Wahoo McDaniel, Blackjack Mulligan, and Jim Brunzell.
Yeah, this was an odd mashup because there were people that they put together who feuded with each other in previous histories. One of the greatest matches in Madison Square Garden, Don Morocco and Jimmy Superfly Snuka in the cage that Mick Foley talked about walking to go see. They were now paired together. Wahoo and Blackjack used to feud all the time. They were working together. So it was basically just a 6-man to give these guys a payday. It was a no contest. It basically kept falling apart, but I really enjoyed it. I went 3 stars on it.
See, I did not. I went 1.5, and I'm going to tell you why. Just because you're a legend from the 70s and 80s. Remember, this is 93. Most of these guys did not wrestle for the most part for a long period of time, full time. It took almost, I would say, at least 7 years for a lot of them full time. And you could definitely see it. The ring rust was there. They were discombobulated in this match. I'm glad it went to a schmoz so nobody got put over or put under. You know, it was a great street fight. But it just proves that guys that are past their prime don't necessarily need to be on a show.
True. Now, 3 of these guys were still working at this time. And they even mentioned some of these guys on the Legends matches came in just for one night. So they weren't permanently working. Like Don Baraka was still working.
Right. This is the only show where it makes sense because they were, showcasing the legends. You couldn't have done this at a Starrcade. I don't think it would have made sense.
No, it wouldn't have. But Morocco was still working, Snuka was still working, and Brunzell was still working at this time. And Dick Murdoch was only a year away out of the ring. He always never had a great physique. No. He looked decent out there. He took most of the attack. And I enjoyed it from the standpoint of, again, we're storytelling guys. We care more about a story. And the story was there. Yes, the action was not great. The story was there, especially where they caused Morocco and Snuka's old feud for them to fall apart. So I get it why you didn't like it and only went 1.5.
Yeah.
But it was still, I thought it was worth watching.
Yeah, it was okay, I guess. But moving along here, we had Thunderbolt Patterson and Brad Armstrong taking on Ivan Koloff and Baron Von Raschke. I got to tell you, I like this match because it was nice to see Baron Von Raschke come out there. You don't get to really see him outside of the 80s, and then you got to see him about 10 years later. He did okay for what he did. I mean, this match here, another one. I mean, thank God Brad Armstrong was in there to take some bumps.
Well, Bullet Bob was supposed to be in this match, and he needed surgery, so he was unavailable.
Yeah.
And that was a last-minute thing, so that's why Brad came down. But they put it over that Brad got mad at Bullet Bob being insulted by Ivan Koloff and Baron Von Raschke, so he wrestled in his street clothes. And that's fine. I'm okay with that when it makes sense.
Yeah.
This wasn't horrible. This was a very regional style of wrestling match. This is something you would have seen in the territory days. It would not have worked in a national scene. It worked for this one time in the legend things, but again, regional matches didn't translate well. I went 2.5. I enjoyed it. It was worth watching.
Yeah, I mean, I went 2 stars. It was okay. It was a good, passing for the setting of the table. It moved on. It was nice to get Brad Armstrong out there. Another guy who just never got to the top anywhere.
Yeah, he
was a great mid-carder, great carpenter.
Yeah, he was definitely the best Armstrong, not named Bullet Bob. His brother was far more charismatic. If you could have took the Road Dogg's charisma and put it in the Candyman, Brad Armstrong, you might have had a world champ.
It's very possible. But now we get to move on to one of your favorite segments, the Flair for the Gold. And I'm telling you, this was just action-packed action here because you had all them old codgers out there, as Steve Austin said, Ric Flair, and you had Arn Anderson, you had Ole Anderson, and you had your favorite, Paul Roma.
I'd rather talk about Fifi. Now, the reason the Flair for the Gold segments were there was because when Ric Flair finished his time in the WWF, when he went back to WCW, it was standard to have a no-compete clause, which means he could appear on TV, he just couldn't compete in the ring. Yep. So that was just about to end. So he'd been doing these Flair for the Gold segments, and they decided they were going to bring back the Horsemen. There were two problems with bringing back the Horsemen. They tried to bring back Barry Windham. Barry Windham said he's moved on from that. He cared more about what he was doing now, defending the NWA Heavyweight Championship, so he declined. Then they asked Tully Blanchard. And Tully Blanchard, who was not with WCW, was not with the WWF, wasn't doing anything except being a preacher, they offered him $500 a shot to appear, and he said that's not worth it. And he said no. So you'll hear them disparage Tully Blanchard during the show, saying Tully Blanchard didn't care about the Horsemen. Well, it's because they only offered him $500 a show to appear. So we got Ole Anderson, who hated Ric Flair. They never got along. With Arn Anderson and Paul Roma, because Paul Roma actually was a pretty guy. That's the only reason he got to be a Horseman.
Was he the worst Horseman ever?
Yes.
Was he worse than Mongo?
Yes.
Wow, okay.
He's worse than Sid. He's worse than Sting.
Wow. Well, yeah. I like Sting, though, in that short period of time.
But Sting as a Horseman didn't work. It was done storyline purposes. The worst Horseman, Paul Roma.
You hear it from the man. Yeah, let's move.
But I want to say something. Ric Flair had his maid out there on a Flair for the Gold. Her name was Fifi.
Yes,
well, in real life, her name was Wendy, and that was his real wife at the time.
Yes. Moving along here, we had Dory Funk Jr. with Gene Kiniski in the corner taking on Nick Bockwinkel and Vern Gagne.
Yeah, this was Johnny Valentine was there doing play-by-play or commentary, and he wasn't bad. It had a nice feel to it. Now, this was billed as the NWA versus the AWA. Dory Funk Jr. was a world champion for 4 years, taking on Nick Bockwinkel, who was a multiple-time champion in the AWA. This one went 15-minute Broadway, and I know we have differing opinions on this one. I thought this was match of the night at 3.5 stars because while it was a Broadway, they put little things in there like instead of just sliding down in the backslide, they worked it. They fought it a little bit. They worked the holds. They didn't try and go for the too many pins. It looked like they were trying to play strategy, and I really enjoyed the storytelling they did. They were both a little past their prime, so that's probably why, but I loved this story, 3.5.
Yeah, out of all the legends in this show, I would say this was probably the best match, but it wasn't that great to me. I went about 2.5. I felt like it was standard. It was like, okay, you can put this in here to help move the card. I don't think this would have ever been a main event at this point. Now, back then, yeah, this would have been a major main event. But, yeah, this match here, it was okay. It worked. It's just, yeah, it really just felt like it was too long to me. It felt like it could have went 10, and I would have been fine with it.
I think that probably is maybe 10 minutes instead of 15 if they're going to go with the Broadway. But I liked it, and when they counted down the final minutes, they did the normal thing where each minute closer to the end, they started picking it up, and it really worked.
Yeah. Moving along here, we have Rick Rude and Paul Orndorff taking on Dustin Rhodes and Kensuke Sasaki. And they call him the Nitro!
Yeah, we got to hear that horrible theme song. Now, Rick Rude was the U.S. champ at this time, and Paul Orndorff was the TV champ at this time, taking on Dustin Rhodes and Kensuke Sasaki, who just had finished being what was known as the Power Warrior when Hawk and Animal had their problems, and Hawk wanted to go solo and took the Road Warriors on the road to Japan and teamed with Kensuke Sasaki, who was known as Power Warrior. It didn't last long, but at least it was good. He was decent. He was a good replacement for a month.
Yeah, he did a decent job, I thought.
Yeah.
This match here I really liked, though, because you had Rick Rude and Paul Orndorff. You know, you had Mr. Wonderful and Simply Ravishing out here. Two great heels that thought they were the greatest thing since sliced bread.
And they actually had good chemistry. I liked their chemistry. It's too bad they didn't stay together longer to do any kind of tag runs. But Rude started having some health problems shortly after this, and it kind of was the downfall that eventually he died in 99.
Yeah, this was a solid match. I went 2.5 with it. I enjoyed it. This was a little more exciting to me.
I went 2.5. The only thing but why they could have had someone better. Dustin Rhodes was not the best person to put with these guys at this time. If he would have done Gold Dust for a year and then come back to do this match, he would have understood more what his role was. But at this point, Kensuke Sasaki had to do most of the work to make this match mean something.
Yeah, and now I'm going to move on to my 2-finger salute, because this match here should not have happened ever, ever, ever in life. And I'm talking about Sting taking on the Prisoner, otherwise known as fucking Nails. Yes, that's exactly what I have written in my notes. I cannot stand the fact that he was in this match. He looked like straight ass. He came out there, he was flopping everywhere. I'm sure Sting's even like, God, why the hell did you book this match? Especially when he went for the finish. He's standing there and he's all discombobulated, and Sting eventually gets him down on the ground for the Scorpion Deathlock. This was a short match, but God, wrong guy here. He just had his issues in the F.
Yeah.
He just had his issues where he had Vince McMahon against the wall and threatened to kill him.
Yep. So we'll come back to what I was hoping you were going to talk about. We'll come back to that. But yes, Sting and the Prisoner. The reason this existed, there is a reason, but it's not a good one. It was supposed to be Sting and Scott Flash Norton. Norton quit because they told him what the plan was, and he went back to Japan. So they were struggling to come up with what to do, and they come out with Nails, the Prisoner, which they had to quickly change to the Convict. That didn't last long either. Now, Kevin Wachholz, you're right. He threatened, before he got fired, he put Vince McMahon against the wall and threatened to kill him. He is also almost single-handedly the reason Vince McMahon about a year later, or about 6 months later, would not get convicted in the steroid trial, because he said on the stand he hated Vince McMahon and he would say anything he could to see Vince McMahon go to jail for life. I gave this match 1 star. I tried to be fair. This match was stupid from the get-go when Nails had 9 straight choke holds.
It was horrible. Just don't watch this. This was the equivalent of when John Tenta took on the Macho Man. We talked about that at that Uncensored. Yeah, that was, oh, God, same thing.
Yeah, and then finally Sting got a couple of punches. Nails wandered around the ring doing his best Top Dollar impression. Just no coordination. He had a physique, but he was horrible to work with. He couldn't talk. He stumbled around the ring all over the place. 1 star. The surprise ending made it even worse, so I'm going to bump it down to 3/4 of a star, because you could tell Sting was like, get me the hell out of here.
Yeah, I'm going to go with you on that. I actually had 1 star myself, but yeah, 3/4 sounds about right. This was horrible. Let's
make ourselves feel better by talking about the actual Hall of Fame. This is where they actually talked about the Hall of Fame people who actually entered the WCW Hall of Fame. There were actually more than 4, but they only had 4 people in the ring. And as we said, that was Lou Thez, Vern Gagne, Mr. Wrestling number 2, and accepting the award for Mike Graham, or Eddie Graham, who had died several years earlier, was his son, Mike Graham.
Yep.
Now, they also brought up the being inducted Buddy Rogers, Andre the Giant, Pat O'Connor, Gene Anderson, Dick the Bruiser, and Wilbur Snyder. These were the first members of the WCW Hall of Fame class. There's too much history to go in here. I'm trying to keep it below 35 minutes here. You're welcome, by the way, editor. So we're not going to go into the history, but pause right here, look up all their names. You'll understand why they're all in the Hall of Fame.
Yeah, I'm going to move into this next match, because I did enjoy this match here. This was definitely good. Cage match. You had the Hollywood Blondes taking on Dos Hombres. I actually did enjoy this because, there was a lot of psychology, and I loved how they used the cage here. I mean, I thought it was a great thing to see. Later on, it wasn't Dos Hombres. It was Ricky Steamboat. And Tom Zink. That is what I've got.
Yes, because Los Dos Hombres. What the story was that Shane Douglas and Ricky Steamboat wore masks because they were keep getting denied shots at the tag team titles, so they came out as a masked jobber team and beat the tag team champions in a non-title match. That was the Hollywood Blondes. Mm-hmm. So they decided to wear it out there again. Well, the only reason they technically wore it out there again because Shane Douglas was unavailable. So they put Tom Zink out there, but they kept calling him Shane Douglas.
Yes, they did.
And they also showed two guys who were sitting over in the corner. They kept looking back to him. Well, I had to do a little research and figure out who those were. The bigger of the two guys wrestled in ECW as 911. Mm-hmm. The other guy was the owner of Eastern Championship Wrestling before it became Extreme Championship Wrestling, Todd Gordon. Yes. Because WCW and ECW had a working relationship at this time.
Yeah, way before the E had theirs.
So this match, I went 2.5. There was a ring bell screw up at the end, which from everything I've been able to gather, that was not on purpose. The ring bell person got a little quick and rang the bell on a long 2.5 count. But it was a little long. It went a little long for the ending that they did. It was still decent, though. I did enjoy it. The surprise stun gun was a good win. 2.5.
Yeah, I mean, I went 2 3/4. This is one of my higher rated matches on the entire card. You know, and this is where the changing of the guard was, because you notice after Slamboree, guys like Austin was starting to move up. Pillman was starting to move up, you know. It was great to see that. I thought this was a great match.
It was. I enjoyed it. I can see I bump it up to 2 3/4. The length in the middle was a little too much, and the fact they kept calling Tom Zink Shane Douglas really annoyed the hell out of me. But all in all, the match was good.
Yeah, and the next match here, we had the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. Yes, NWA was still merged in WCW at this point. It was Barry Windham taking on Arn Anderson.
Yeah, Barry Windham, the champion here. This is the big gold belt. You're right. Now, WCW had already become its own place, but the NWA still had a working relationship with them. So the NWA had lost world title status, was trying to get it back by having that title appear on the show. And they did a really good job of putting over the belt and putting over that Barry Windham, who had just beaten Great Muta for the belt, was doing his own thing, was representing the NWA. And Arn Anderson did a good job of helping make this match and making Barry Windham look good on this match. I went 3 stars on this one. This was a decent, enjoyable match.
Yeah, I mean, I went 2 3/4. I didn't really have anything 3 stars on this show, but I felt like this was, above the standard just a little bit. I loved the match. It would have been nice to see Arn win a world title, but he never did.
Yeah, and I it's like AWA. I ranked them generally higher than you did. I got some a little more old school. The 10-year age difference probably helps too.
It does. But yeah, moving along here, we got the main event. And yes, I'm not overly excited on this one because you had the British Bulldog, another guy that they thought was going to win a world championship at one point, never did, taking on Big Van Vader with Harley Race in the corner.
Yeah, this one, I understand why they put their world champion that had world title status in the main event. But in all honesty, they should have flip-flopped with this one and Barry Windham.
Yeah.
That should have been the main event because this match was slow and plodding. The crowd lost interest in this match. And with the fact that it was a DQ win really hurt the ending of this show. It really felt like Lex Luger's count-out win against Yokozuna.
Yes. I mean, it was just very lackluster. I mean, at the end of it, you see Bulldog trying to take Harley Race and actually chokeslam. He lifts him up about a couple feet, he drops, and then it turns away from the camera. I guess he slammed him. That's what I'm taking. Vader takes a chair and gets disqualified. This was a schmoz. This belonged on like Saturday night, WCW or something like that. It definitely did not belong as the main event on this style of show.
Yeah, like I said, I understand why they thought this match was going to be better than it was, but as we've said, you don't put 2 muscle-bound meatheads out there that both do the same style. Now, I did like their open with Vader hitting him as hard as he could and clotheslining and Bulldog no-selling it. I did like that opening, but after that opening, they didn't continue that same momentum, and that really, again, another thing that hurt this match.
Yeah, and then to hurt the show, of course, I guess they wanted to pay tribute to the old Starrcade '83. They wanted to have a post-show.
Yeah,
At least it was only about 8 minutes.
Yeah, Missy Hyatt, why she got jobs, actually because she was blonde-haired and well-stacked before she discovered plastic surgery. She can't talk. She actually was flirting with John Tolos and tried to interview Mad Dog Vachon during this show. It was, yeah, they didn't learn. We don't need a post-show. People tune out in droves and it hurts your cost.
Yes, I mean, they had to do that. And that's the end of our show here.
All right.
Slamboree 93.
I will say, even despite the variance in our ratings, it is worth watching if you're a purist and like old style wrestling. This is not bad old style wrestling for the most part. So if you want to see some purists and see what the old looked like versus what it looks like today, this is a good one to watch.
Oh, you want to see bad?
Oh, no.
Oh, yeah, we're going back down the rabbit hole. Let me just point it right out to you. Happy 2023, y'all. We're going back to 1995. I'm Dr. Quack.
And I'm the important one, Mr. Mayhem. I'm trying not to choke the crap out of Dr. Quack.
We'll see you next time.